My name is Elara Vane. I was 50 years old when my marriage ended. Not with screaming, not with broken plates or slammed doors.
It ended with a receipt. A tiny, wrinkled receipt I found in the pocket of my husband's navy coat while doing laundry on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. 2 glasses of wine, 1 seafood dinner for 2. Juan chocolate soufflé. The date printed at the top made my stomach twist. It was our anniversary. The same night he told me he was working late at the architecture firm. I remember standing there in the laundry room holding that paper between my fingers while the dryer hummed beside me. 31 years of marriage suddenly felt fragile, thin, like old paper left too long in the sun. My husband, Corvin Halle, had always been calm, controlled. The kind of man who folded sweaters with military precision and corrected restaurant menus under his breath. When I confronted him that night, I expected denial. Instead, he sighed. Actually, sighed. Then he sat down at the kitchen table and rubbed his forehead like I had exhausted him. "I didn't want you to find out this way," he said. That sentence split my life in half. I stared at him while the rain hit the windows behind me. "How long?" I asked. He hesitated. And that hesitation told me everything before he even spoke. 10 years. 10 years. A decade. An entire secret life hidden beneath our marriage. I wish I could say I screamed. I wish I could say I threw something. But heartbreak at 50 doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like a woman quietly sitting down because her knees suddenly stop working. The woman's name was Mirail Arden, an art gallery owner from Portland. He told me they met during a business conference. He said it just happened. Then it continued happening. Then eventually he didn't know how to stop. I remember laughing. Not because anything was funny, because I had spent 31 years making excuses for a man who never truly chose me. The next morning, I packed 1 suitcase, not because I was weak. Because I knew if I stayed another hour in that house, I would slowly disappear. 3 months later, I bought a tiny bookstore by the sea. The town was called Bellmere Cove. Small, windy, salt in the air. The kind of place where everyone knew each other's coffee order. The bookstore sat at the edge of a narrow coastal road, painted pale blue with white shutters that rattled during storms. Its old wooden sign read, "The Tide and Tail." The previous owner, an elderly woman named Odessa Vale, had retired after 40 years. "People still need stories," she told me while handing me the keys, especially the ones trying to survive their own. I didn't realize how badly I needed saving until I unlocked that door for the first time. The shop smelled like cedar shelves and worn paperbacks. I spent weeks repainting walls, reorganizing novels, fixing crooked lamps, and learning which floorboards squeaked. For the first time in decades, my life belonged entirely to me. And yet, at night, loneliness still sat beside me. Some evenings I would close the shop, make tea in the tiny apartment upstairs, and wonder how someone could spend 31 years loving the wrong person. Then the letters started appearing. The first one arrived on a Thursday morning. No envelope, just a folded cream-colored page resting on the bookstore counter. The handwriting was elegant, sharp, intentional. It read, "You always play Debussy when it rains. That tells me your sadness still believes in beauty." No signature. I looked around the empty shop, confused. It had been raining the day before. And yes, I had played Debussy. I assumed one of the customers left it as some strange artistic gesture. But 3 days later, another letter appeared. "You smile at customers before they reach the register. Most people wait to see if kindness is deserved. You give it first. That's rare." Again, no signature. I should have felt unsettled. Instead, I felt seen. For months after my divorce, I had felt invisible. Like the world only noticed younger women, happier women, women who hadn't been betrayed. But whoever wrote those letters noticed tiny things about me. The books I displayed, the songs I've played, the way I tucked loose hair behind my ear while reading, and slowly, against my better judgment, I started waiting for them. Every few days, another letter appeared. Sometimes beneath the register, sometimes between pages of books, once tucked inside a copy of Jane Eyre. You look like someone rebuilding herself carefully, like stained glass after a storm. I read that one 6 times. Then there was another, the sea comes when you open the front windows in the morning. I think even the ocean likes hearing your voice. I should probably admit something. At 50, after betrayal, compliments feel dangerous because you no longer trust them. You wonder what people want. You wonder how long before admiration becomes disappointment. But those letters expected nothing from me. They simply arrived, like small lanterns in the middle of dark water. One afternoon, about 4 months after opening the shop, a man walked in carrying a stack of weathered books. Tall, broad shoulders, silver threaded through dark hair. He wore a charcoal coat damp from ocean mist, but it was his eyes I noticed first. Quiet eyes. The kind that looked like they carried entire histories. "Afternoon," he said softly. His voice had that low, steady warmth some people spend decades searching for. I nodded. "Can I help you?" "I'm donating these," he said. "My sister used to love this place." I looked down at the books. Poetry collections, classics, annotated novels. "You read?" I asked. "Mostly at night." There was something reserved about him, not cold, careful, like someone who had once spoken too freely and paid for it. His name was Thayer Marrow, an unusual name. "One," I repeated, silently, after he left. Over the next few weeks, he returned often, sometimes for coffee from the small corner cafe inside the bookstore, sometimes to browse shelves without buying anything. He never flirted, never lingered too long, but he always noticed details. "You moved to the Russian novels," he said one morning. "You noticed? You seem happier with them near the windows." That answer stayed with me all day. Then, one rainy evening, after closing time, I found another letter. This one simply said, "Loneliness becomes quieter around the right person." I froze, because suddenly I knew the handwriting, the observations, the calm precision, Thayer. The next day, I waited. And when he entered the bookstore around noon, carrying Seawind with him, I walked directly toward him. "You wrote them," I said. For a moment, he looked genuinely startled, then embarrassed. "I should probably apologize." "Why?" "Because it was inappropriate." "No," I said quietly. "It was kind." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something I will never forget. "You looked like someone trying very hard not to disappear." That nearly broke me, because it was true. After my marriage ended, I stopped feeling like a woman. I became a routine, a survivor, a person rebuilding practical things while emotionally collapsing in private. But Thayer looked at me like I was still alive, still worth noticing. If you're enjoying this story so far, take a second to subscribe to the channel. Leave a like and comment where you're watching from. I always love hearing which part of the world these stories reach, and your support truly helps this channel grow. After that conversation, everything changed slowly. Not dramatically, not recklessly. Beautiful things at 50 move differently. They move carefully. Thayer began staying after closing to help me reorganize shelves. We developed rituals. Tea at 6. Music while sorting books. Watching storms roll over the ocean from the front windows. He told me he had once been a history professor. Widowed 8 years earlier, his wife, Celestine, had died from a sudden aneurysm. I spent years speaking to grief more than people. He admitted one night, I understood that sentence immediately. Pain recognizes pain. One evening, the power went out during a storm. The bookstore felt dark, except for gray lightning beyond the windows. I laughed nervously while searching for candles. "This place suddenly feels haunted," I said. "It's a bookstore. Thayer replied. Every bookstore is haunted. I laughed harder than I had in years. Hey, owl laughter. The kind that loosens something trapped inside your ribs. When I finally found the candles, we sat together near the register while rain battered the roof, and for the first time since my divorce, silence no longer felt heavy. It felt safey. Then came the moment that terrified me. Not our first touch. Not our first dinner. Trust, because love after betrayal is frightening. You constantly wait for evidence that history will repeat itself. One afternoon, I found myself watching Thayer while he shelved books. A sudden panic hit me so hard I had to step outside. What if this was another illusion? What if kindness always turned temporary? What if love at 50 was just desperation disguised as hope? I stood near the cliffs beside the bookstore while cold wind whipped through my coat. A few minutes later, Thayer joined me. He didn't ask what was wrong immediately. He simply stood beside me. Finally, I whispered, "How do you know someone won't destroy you?" He looked out toward the ocean. "You don't?" That answer surprised me. Then he continued, "But eventually you realize avoiding love destroys you too." I felt tears rise instantly. I gave 31 years to the wrong person, I admitted. "No," he said gently. "You gave 31 years as the right person." I turned toward him, and for the first time in a very long time, someone understood the difference. A week later, he kissed me. Softly, slowly, like he was asking permission from every broken part of me. I cried afterward, not because it felt wrong, because it felt safe. And safety had become unfamiliar. The months that followed became the most unexpected season of my life. We started taking long walks along the shoreline every morning before opening the shop. We debated novels over dinner. We danced badly in the bookstore after closing. We learned each other's silences. One night, I asked him why he started writing the letters. He smiled faintly. "The first day I walked in here," he said, "you were reading poetry aloud to yourself while fixing a broken lamp." I laughed. That sounds ridiculous. It sounded lonely. Then he added quietly, "And beautiful." Nobody had called me beautiful in years. Not sincerely. Corvin used compliments like obligations. Quick, mechanical, distracted, but Thayer noticed beauty in moments, in laughter, in resilience, in ordinary gestures. That changes a person, especially a woman who spent years feeling emotionally abandoned. Then one afternoon, something happened I never expected. Corvin came to Bellmere Cove. I saw his car outside the bookstore and nearly dropped the box I was carrying. He walked inside wearing the same polished expression he always wore. Controlled, confident, but older. "Smaller somehow, Elara," he said. I felt strangely calm. "What are you doing here? I wanted to see you." "Why?" He glanced around the bookstore. "This place suits you." I crossed my arms. "You didn't drive 6 hours to discuss interior design." That almost made him smile. Then his expression shifted. Mireille left. I stared at him. She moved to Paris last month. I waited, and suddenly I realized something astonishing. I felt nothing, no satisfaction, no revenge, no desire to comfort him, just distance. He looked at me carefully. "You seem different." "I am." Then he noticed the second teacup on the counter. "Someone else here." Before I could answer, the front door opened. Thayer walked in, carrying fresh flowers wrapped in brown paper. The silence that followed was almost cinematic. Corvin looked between us, and I watched realization settle across his face. Not jealousy, regret, the devastating kind. Thayer stopped beside me naturally, not possessively, just close enough for me to feel steady. Corvin cleared his throat. "I should go." "Yes," I said. At the door, he turned back. "I never thought you'd leave for real." That sentence stayed with me long after he disappeared. because that was the tragedy of our marriage. He thought my love guaranteed permanence. He thought loyalty meant tolerating betrayal forever. But eventually, even the most patient heart reaches its limit. That night, after closing the bookstore, Thayer and I sat on the floor between the fiction shelves eating lemon cake from the bakery nearby. I was terrified for a second, he admitted. Why? That you'd still love him? I looked at him carefully. Love doesn't survive endless disrespect, I said. Then I smiled softly. But kindness does survive. That's the dangerous part. He understood exactly what I meant. Months later, during winter, Bellmere Cove was hit by a massive coastal storm. The power failed across town. Waves crashed violently against the cliffs. The bookstore windows shook all night. Around midnight, I came downstairs and found Thayer sitting near the front window watching the ocean. "You okay?" I asked. He looked up at me, then reached into his coat pocket. "I wrote one more letter," he said. My chest tightened. He handed it to me. The handwriting was instantly familiar. I unfolded the page carefully. It read, "You arrived in this town believing your life had ended, but some stories fall apart only because a better chapter is trying to begin. And for the first time in years, when I imagine the future, I'm no longer alone in it." By the time I finished reading, tears blurred the ink. I looked at him. Then I crossed the room and kissed him before fear could interrupt me. Outside, the storm roared against the sea. But inside that tiny bookstore, surrounded by stories and candlelight and second chances, I realized something extraordinary. Life does not end at 50. Love does not disappear after betrayal. And sometimes, the people who truly see us arrive only after everything else falls apart. Today, the Tide and Tail is still open. Every morning, I unlock the front door while the ocean wind carries salt through the streets of Bellmere Cove. Thayer still leaves me letters sometimes, usually tucked inside books. Last week, I found one hidden inside a poetry collection. It simply said you were never too old to begin again. You were only waiting for the right place to be found. And maybe that's true for all of us. Maybe heartbreak is not the end of the story. Maybe it's just the chapter that finally leads us home. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Leave a like and comment below. Do you believe love can find us again later in life? I read as many comments as I can, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. He noticed me standing there and smiled sleepily. "You're staring again?" he said. "I'm evaluating your coffee-making technique, and still flawed." He laughed quietly, and that sound alone was enough to warm the entire room. It amazed me sometimes how healing could arrive so gently, not through dramatic transformations, not through revenge, not through becoming someone new, but through finally being loved in a way that didn't require shrinking yourself. By spring, the bookstore had become more than a business. It became part of the town itself. People gathered there during storms. Teenagers sat in the poetry aisle after school. Retired couples spent hours drinking tea near the windows. And every Friday evening, Thayer started hosting literary discussions beside the fireplace. The first one only had 6 people. 3 months later, we had to bring in extra chairs. Watching him speak during those evenings became one of my favorite things. The quiet man who once hid inside grief now laughed openly, told stories, debated novels with passion. Sometimes I would stand behind the register, pretending to organize receipts while secretly admiring him. And every single time, he would somehow notice. One evening after closing, he caught me staring again. "You're doing it." "Doing what?" "Looking at me like I'm a paragraph you're trying to memorize." I smiled. "Maybe I am." He walked toward me slowly, stopping beside the fiction shelves. "You know," he said softly, "I spent years believing the best parts of my life were already over." I looked up at him. "So did I." Then he touched my cheek gently, and we were both wrong. That spring, Bellmere Cove held its annual coastal festival. The entire town transformed for 3 days. String lights hung above the streets. Local musicians played near the harbor. Food stalls lined the boardwalk. The bookstore stayed open late during the festivities, and customers flowed in constantly. At one point, Odessa Vale, the former owner, visited unexpectedly. She woke slowly now, leaning on a polished wooden cane, but her sharp eyes missed nothing. She looked around the crowded bookstore with quiet satisfaction. Then she turned toward me. "You brought it back to life," she said. Emotion caught me off guard. "No," I replied softly. "I think it brought me back to life." Her gaze shifted toward Thayer across the room. Then a knowing smile appeared. "Ah," she murmured. "So that's the reason your windows glow differently now." I laughed harder than I intended. Later that night, after the festival fireworks ended, Thayer and I walked along the shoreline beneath the stars. The ocean reflected silver moonlight, while distant music drifted through the town. I remember thinking how strange life was. At 49, I thought my story was ending. At 51, I was standing barefoot beside the sea, beside a man who made the world feel kind again. We stopped near the cliffs, overlooking the water. Then Thayer reached into his coat pocket. I immediately laughed. "Another letter, maybe?" He handed me a folded page. The paper trembled slightly in my hands as I opened it. It read, "Some people survive heartbreak and become bitter. You survived and remained gentle." I think that may be the bravest thing I've ever witnessed. My throat tightened instantly. "Thayer," but before I could finish speaking, he took another step closer. "I wasted years thinking love was something that only happened once," he said quietly. "Like lightning. Rare, unrepeatable." The ocean crashed below us. Then he reached into his pocket again. This time, a small velvet box appeared in his hand. I stared at him in complete shock. "Elara Vane," he said softly, almost smiling through his nerves. "Would you allow me to spend whatever years we have left writing letters to you?" I started crying before he even opened the box. The ring inside was simple, elegant, a small sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds, not extravagant, perfect. "Yes," I whispered immediately. "Yes, of course." He exhaled like he had been holding that breath for weeks. Then he slipped the ring onto my finger while ocean wind whipped around us. And standing there beneath the stars, I realized something profound. Young love burns fast, but love later in life, love after loss, love after betrayal, that kind of love carries tenderness inside it. Patience, gratitude, an understanding of how precious it is simply to find someone who stays. We married 6 months later in the bookstore itself. No grand ballroom, no luxury venue, just shelves full of stories, candles glowing against old wood, ocean wind drifting through open windows. The town came together to help. The bakery made lemon cakes, local florists filled the shop with white roses and eucalyptus. Someone even played piano near the fireplace before the ceremony began. I wore a simple ivory dress. When I walked downstairs and saw Thayer waiting for me between the shelves, emotion nearly overwhelmed me. Not because the moment felt perfect, because it felt real. He looked at me with tears already in his eyes, and after everything life had taken from both of us, after grief and betrayal and loneliness, we still found each other. During the ceremony, the officiants asked if we had written personal vows. Thayer smiled immediately. Of course, she expected letters from me by now. Everyone laughed softly. Then he unfolded a piece of paper from his jacket pocket. "My entire life," he began, "I believed love was proven through permanence. But permanence means nothing without presence. You taught me that real love is attention. It's listening, noticing, staying soft with someone long after life gives you reasons to harden." I was crying openly by then. Then he looked directly at me. "Elara, I promise to notice you for the rest of my life, even in ordinary moments. Especially in ordinary moments." There are sentences that enter your heart permanently. That was one of them. When it was my turn, I could barely steady my voice. I spent years believing I had failed because my marriage failed, I admitted. But loving the wrong person does not make someone unworthy of love. And meeting you taught me something I wish every broken person understood. I took his hands carefully. It is never too late to begin again. There wasn't a dry eye in the bookstore after that, not even Odysseus, especially not Odysseus. Years have passed since then. The Tide and Tail still stands beside the sea, its pale blue shutters rattling during storms. Thayer still leaves me letters, hundreds of them now. Some are poetic, some ridiculous, some only contain a single sentence. Last month, I found one tucked inside the cash register. It said, "You still smile at strangers before they earn it." And after all these years, I still think that's my favorite thing about you. I kept that one in my coat pocket for days. Sometimes younger women visit the bookstore and quietly confess their fears to me. Fear of starting over, fear of aging, fear that love has already passed them by. And every time, I tell them the truth. Life is not ruined because it changes direction. Some endings are not punishments. Some are invitations. If my marriage had not shattered, I never would have found Bellmere Cove. I never would have opened this bookstore. I never would have met the man who taught me what it feels like to be truly seen. That is the strange beauty of life. Sometimes losing what you thought was your future is the exact thing that leads you to the future you were actually meant for. And every morning now, before opening the bookstore, I stand beside the front windows with my coffee while ocean waves crash against the cliffs below. Thayer usually appears a few minutes later carrying fresh flowers or some forgotten novel he insists I need to reread. Then he kisses my forehead gently, like it's the most natural thing in the world. And after everything, after betrayal, after loneliness, after 31 years of slowly disappearing inside the wrong love, I finally understand something extraordinary. Home is not a place. It's the person who notices your sadness, still believes in beauty,